Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Mid Suffolk District Council Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Sarah Mansell and I will be chairing the committee this morning. May I first of all remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off and that your laptops are switched to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you intend to do so, please could you inform the committee clerk. If you hear the fire alarm, leave the building immediately via a fire exit and make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exits. Do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so. So first of all, some introductions. On the front row on my left, we have the planning officers and the area planning manager, Gemma Walker. Behind them, we have our legal advisors, Ian Dupre and Adela Luke. We have either side of me the governance officers, Claire Philpott and Alicia Norman, and on my right we have the members of the committee who will be making the decision. So, can I move to the agenda, please? Item number 1, apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Elkin and Councillor Warboys. Councillor Overett is substituting for Councillor Warboys and Councillor Matheson is substituting for Councillor Elkin. And also we are still waiting the arrival of Councillor Haddingham. Thank you.
Who is stuck in traffic and hopefully she will arrive. Item number 2, to receive declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable or non-registrable interests by members. Are there any interests to declare? Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, I am a director of Mid Suffolk Holdings Limited and accordingly will not be taking part in the discussion on the Gateway 14 application.
Thank you. Any other interests? Okay, item number 3, declarations of lobbying. Anyone received any lobbying? I take that as a no. Item number 4, declarations of personal site visits. Any personal site visits? No, okay. Item number 5, confirmation of the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 20th of November, which were in our late papers. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? If not, then could I have a proposer to agree those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. And a seconder, Councillor Penny. Thank you. The Governance Officer will now conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is in progress. Thank you, Chair. That's 5 votes for and 2 abstentions. That's carried.
Thank you. Item number 6, to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
And now we move to the schedule of planning applications, which we are going to take in the reverse order. So we're going to do item 7B first, which is the Gateway 14. But before we begin, I'd just like to ask the Area Planning Manager to make a comment, given that we have a new National Planning Policy Framework, which was published earlier this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. Yep, so hopefully come across this, that we got the new revised MPPF last week. There aren't significant changes as far as today is concerned. Owen's got a couple, it's more just paragraph numbers. Dan's got some more extensive ones, but you'll find you got an email around last night, and I think Claire's got a printed copy if anybody would like a paper version that just runs through what those amendments are. Essentially, a lot of it is paragraph numbers. There's been quite a few deletions more than additions potentially. And where there are changes, particularly for Shop Street and Worlingworth, we've just run through those, what they mean. But overall, we're content that that doesn't make any change to our recommendation today. But so we'll run through those in detail. And I know we're discussing sort of a members' update early in January, hopefully, so we can kind of cover a bit more detail for members. But I'm happy to take any questions, perhaps, as they come up. But just a very quick update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I'm going to now move to item 7B, which is DC 2404515 at Gateway 14, plot 1600, land between the A1120 and the A14 at Creeting St Peter, Stowmarket, Suffolk. So Councillor Matheson's going to leave, and Councillor Patchett is going to move across and act as the ward member. So he won't be able to participate in the debate, but he can make comments. I will now invite the case officer, Owen Fires, to introduce the application to committee. Thank you, Owen.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So today I'm presenting an application for advertisement consent at plot 1600, Gateway 14, Stowmarket. So before I start, as Gemma's briefly kind of discussed, I'd like to update members that following the publication of the latest MPPF, it should be noted that under paragraph 5.1 of the agenda, but paragraph 115 of the MPPF has now been superseded by paragraph 116. However, there is no material change to our recommendation. I'm sure members are aware, Gateway 14 is located to the southeastern end of Stowmarket, south of the A14 and to the east of the A1120. Plot 1600, subject of this application, is situated to the northeastern corner as outlined in red. So this is an aerial map of the site and its wider context, again noting some of the surrounding context. Moving into the site constraints, as detailed on the presentation slide. So this slide depicts the site layout with the blue lines to the northwestern corner of the warehouse signifying the externally illuminated signage. Moving into the proposed elevations, with the externally illuminated Bowder signage situated to the northwestern corner of the warehouse above the orange-clad glazed corner. The remaining signage is situated along the western elevation, consisting of a reception sign, 9 numbered signs above the loading bays, and 2 freestanding totem directional signage. To reiterate, there is no proposed signage on the eastern and southern elevations of the warehouse building. Now, the following slides will provide a bit more detail of the signage being proposed. So this slide shows the externally illuminated Bowder signage situated to the northwestern corner of the warehouse. To reiterate, this is the only illuminated signage proposed as part of this application. So these slides show the totem directional signage, which would stand at 2 meters in height. The signage would be located at the site entrance, as seen in red on the site plan. And to the rear of the car park, respectively, again as outlined in red. This slide shows the details of the reception signage and the numbered loading bay signage, which are located on the western elevation of the warehouse. So this is a photo of plot 1600, taken on 6th of December. This photo is taken from the access into the site, showing the north and western elevations of the warehouse. You may be able to make out the openings to this corner here, which is where the orange glad glazed corner is going to be located, above which is the location of the externally illuminated signage. Then we can also see along the western elevation, we've got the loading bay sort of openings, above which again the numbered signage as well as the reception sign would be located. It is recommended that advertisement consent is granted, subject to conditions as detailed within your agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Owen. I will now invite any questions from members. Councillor Penny.
Sign. Is everything okay, Chair? Yeah, is the externally illuminated sign on for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or is there a limit?
So we don't have details at this time as to what timings the signage would be illuminated. However, the level of lighting in question is considered to be minor and has been conditioned to not exceed 300 candela. So one would imagine that when the building is not in use and not operational, the signage would be switched off. But that's not something that's been conditioned.
Any other questions? I'd just like to ask a question following on from Councillor Penny's question. I understand that the operating hours are conditioned by the original planning permission. So when that condition becomes is submitted for discharge, you know, can the lighting be added into, you know, when they're not open, the lights are off? Can that be added to that sort of when they discharge those conditions? Thank you.
I would need to review the wording of that condition as to whether or not that's something we could implement into that. However, I don't see that that wouldn't be a reason that we could necessarily look at that stage.
Councillor Overett.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wondered if there's any plan for consistency of design across the whole site that this is kind of fed into, because I think there's been 6 applications for lighting since across the whole plot so far.
Thank you. So, again, I understand with Gateway 14 as a site, there is a design code sort of thing that is being followed generally. I think within each site, each occupier is going to have their own sort of persona and flair. So, I think there are going to be some levels of difference across the plots. However, I think the overarching aim is that Gateway 14 will have a consistent design.
Are there any other questions from members? And we don't have anyone from the parish council, we don't have an objector, we don't have a supporter, we don't have the agent, we do have the ward member. So Councillor Patchett, would you like to say anything about this application? No. Okay, fair enough. Well, I'll open this item up for debate then. Councillor Overett?
I'm not sure there's an awful lot to debate. I think actually the design is very attractive and I'm very happy to support it.
Are you actually proposing that we grant that we go along with the officer recommendation? Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hardingham, thank you. Does anybody wish to say anything about this application? If not, then we can go straight to a vote. So I will ask the governance officer to conduct the electronic vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote's in progress. You might need to scroll down just a little bit. Councillor Overett, your vote hasn't come through, has you? Yeah.
I sometimes forget to press the red button and submit. I think I've done it right.
No problem. That's great, thank you. Chair, that's 5 votes for, thank you.
So that's carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Haddingham has just arrived. She'll need a few minutes to get herself sorted out. We also need to get Councillor Matheson back in the room. So I suggest we have just a 5-minute break and we'll meet back here just before 10, so we're all ready to go for 10 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you for returning promptly. We will now move straight on to item 7A, DC 23-05768, land to the south of Shop Street, Worlingworth, Suffolk. And I will now invite the case officer, Daniel Cameron, to introduce the application to committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a Section 73 application to vary Condition 2 of a reserved matters. In terms of updates for members, there was the update to the MPPF that was mentioned by Gemma at the start of the meeting. An update for members should have been circulated regarding changes to MPPF paragraph numbers. In terms of the material impact of those changes, there's no change to the content of those paragraphs, only their number. So there's no impact on the overall conclusion that's reached within the officer's report. The other thing to note within the officer's report is when I was checking the officer's report to provide the MPPF update, sections 4, 5, 6 and 7 all have sort of slightly odd paragraph numbers, but I've only caught that after it's been circulated, so apologies for that, members. The site was granted outline planning permission for 26 dwellings with 9 affordables under DC 17-04689, and we have section 106 securing the affordable housing and the open space. We then later had reserve matters granted under DC 21-00755. In terms of the site, we have the village of Worlingworth off to the east here, following down Shop Street that turns into Church Street later, and then to either side of the road here we have Tuckwells, so they're a John Deere parts equipment repairer and sales place. If we come slightly further out, you can see the run of the rest of the village, and then you can see that the road sort of turns up and enters into the countryside further out. In terms of constraints, we've got a little cluster of Grade 2 listed buildings off to the west, and also slightly further off to the east. We're adjacent to the conservation area, and we have a public right-of-way that runs north-south through the site. In terms of flood risk, we're in flood zone 1. There is comment from the parish council in terms of foul water drainage and issues with surface water entering the foul water drainage scheme and creating issues there. But in terms of the surface water drainage scheme, the lead local flood authority are content with the submitted flood risk scheme, such that our surface water from this site shouldn't enter the foul drainage system and shouldn't create any additional impacts. If I come slightly further on, this is the newly proposed layout. I'll go on to the previously approved layout. We used to have an area of public open space within this central location. This has now been switched for houses, and the public open space has been moved over. The run of the public right-of-way is unaffected. It still goes north-south through the site, and we only have one crossing point over the public right-of-way now as well. This is the previously approved scheme. We have a tighter grain of development on this eastern side of the site, which now moves across, so we have a looser grain of development through the site, and also we have less conflict with the public right-of-way and the internal road layout. In terms of changes to the internal road layout, we've had consultation with Highways, who are content that this is suitable, and if we go back to the previously approved scheme, we do have a track change drawing, so a waste tender and a fire tender will be able to make access to the site and turn within the site at the appropriate turning heads here and here. In terms of the landscaping plan, if I can get it to, no, we'll go back to the original. So previously the landscaping included an equipped leap and a large feature tree. As you can see, that's now been removed, but we still retain a number of tree planting within the public open space and within the site. In terms of removal of that feature tree, Public Realm and Place Services Landscaping are content in that they had concerns over whether it would thrive within the site, and we've also had changes made to the landscape planting within the site, so that we don't just have native species, we have locally adapted native species within there as well. If we come on now, so part of the changes are to the house types. So we have buff brick and red brick with appropriate tile, fairly traditional house types. We have 3 bungalows within the site, 3 3-bed bungalows, And then we've also got some addition of some larger 5-bed dwellings. In terms of the overall mix, the number of 3-bed dwellings within the site has been reduced, and that is to accommodate the increase in 5-bed dwellings. In terms of affordable housing, the level of affordable housing is still met within the Section 106, so there's no need for a fresh deed of variation. The drainage strategy here just shows that the private rights-of-way are to be permanently paved, so rainwater should be able to recharge ground aquifers. The main adoptable spine road through the site will be fitted with drains, and then surface water from the site runs off towards a drainage ditch at the back, which is then piped into this remaining drainage ditch and then piped into another existing drainage ditch within the village. And if we just look through the previously approved plan, so as we saw previously, we've got that central open space, and then these were the previously approved house types. They're still quite traditional in appearance, but they have this modern addition of significant glazing, particularly at the rear. We have addition of Juliet balconies, but we also have some elements within the bungalow properties of sort of fully glazed gable ends, and then this half glazed detached unit as well. In terms of views across the site, this is the view towards the village of Worlingworth. You'll see from the plans there are a number of dwellings, buildings indicated. These are converted farm buildings down here off this end of the site. This is a view across the site looking south. The drainage ditch runs along back here. This is then across the frontage of the site towards Tuckwells and out of the village. And then this is the view along Shop Street. So we've got significant setback from the frontage as well. And then that's the view looking the other way towards Tuckwells. In terms of the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. We brought across conditions previously imposed on the reserved matters that still need to be discharged. In terms of additional conditions, we've got conditions in to secure details of the play equipment to be brought forward on the leap within the site, and we've also secured conditions to bring the development in line with the JLP in terms of provision of 50% of the dwellings meeting Part M42 of building regulations, which is around accessibility, and also Part G1, which is around reduced water usage within the properties. There's also, you'll see, informatives brought forward on the site in terms of redischarging previously discharged conditions. So condition 5 and 6 of the outline we continue to apply, but in discussion with the lead local flood authority, they feel that given the changes to the layout that we'll be approving here, those conditions would need to be redischarged. There's no issue with redischarging those conditions, and we've already spoken to the applicant about bringing applications forward to do so. I'll hand over now to committee in case there's any questions arising from the report and the presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Everett.
Yeah, I did just have a question about the table on page 20. I think it says that there are, sorry, I've just lost it again. 3 4-bedroom terrace houses. I'm not sure that's the case on the diagram. I think maybe those are detached houses. Just wanted to clarify how many terraces there are.
No, we do have some 3-bed terraces. Sorry, there was 4 beds. 2 beds, 3 beds, 3 beds, 2 beds.
So this has got a...
Yeah. Let me find where I need to... Yep. So 4 beds, 4 beds. I think you're right. I think you're right, Councillor. I think they are. I think that's my mistake in the table. Apologies.
So those three four-bed terraces, are they there at all, or are they some other sort of house? Just to clarify.
I think it's my error in saying that they're terraced units. I think the councillor's right. I think they are detached units. If we run through, we've got plot number 1, which is a 5-bed unit, plot number 2, which is a 4-bed unit, plot number 3, which is a 3-bed unit. Then we nip down plot number 4, which is a 2-bed unit, 2 2-bed terraces. 6 and 7 are 2 3-bed terraces. If we come slightly further down, we have 16, 17, 18, which are the 1-bed terrace units. Then running along the back, we have a 3-bed unit at plot 19, a 4-bed unit at plot 20, a 4-bed unit at plot 21, a 5-bed at 22, a 4-bed at 23, a 3-bed at 24, a 5-bed at 25, and a 5-bed at 26. And then if we come into that central parcel, we have a 3-bed plot 8, a 4-bed plot 9, a 5-bed plot 10, 3-bed plot 15, 2 3-bed terraces at 13 and 14, and then 2 2-bed terraces at 11 and 12.
So I think on the table,
I think it should
first
refer
column
to,
should say 3-bed.
I think it should refer to.
There are 3 3-bed terraces. Yeah. Thank you. Well spotted, Councillor Overett. I also saw Councillor Hardingham's hand up. So if you'd like to go next.
Yes, well, I have got several questions, but the first one is that I noticed Anglian Water said that they would require significant upgrade to their facilities during one of the consultations, one of their responses to the consultation. Is the section 106 and the SIL money adequate to cover the cost of Anglian Water upgrades, or how is that going to be funded, and how do we make sure that it will happen?
Anglian Water would need to deal with that themselves. The SIL money wouldn't be made available to Anglian Water to upgrade their facilities. So in terms of their consultation response, for the variation of condition that we have before us, they're content it doesn't affect their drainage matters. I have provided the comments from the original application at Reserve Matters. So they've asked for an informative to protect their assets close to the site. Anglian Water say that they will plan for the downstream implications, and they'll work directly with the applicants to provide that. And then in terms of surface water, they previously found the previous scheme for surface water drainage to be acceptable. The LLFA have considered that the updated scheme is also acceptable for dealing with surface water drainage issues.
Thank you. Yes, my question was, the surface water I think is well catered for, but it was the foul water that I was concerned about.
Anglian Water have a legal duty to connect any dwelling with planning permission to the foul water network.
Yeah.
In terms of separation of surface water and foul water on this site, that would be dealt with in that surface water would be dealt with by a separate drainage system within the site. So it wouldn't be channeled into the foul water system.
Thank you.
Did you have more questions?
Well, I have. Let me see. The cycle storage. I note that cycle storage is going to be in garages, but not all houses have garages. So what provision is being made for those that don't have garages?
Sorry, just confirming with there are sheds provided for all the dwellings, so there would be provision within the sheds for those dwellings that don't have garages.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. Yes, staying with the drainage issues for a moment. I think you said that the lead local flood authority were content with redischarging. Are you saying they've actually effectively discharged it again already on this plan?
So when we originally had the reserve matters approved under DC 21-00755, we have had discharge of condition made for condition 5 and 6 of the outline, which dealt with drainage matters. So because we're changing the layout of the scheme now, we need to change some of those previously discharged conditions to reflect the updated layout. But that's acceptable. We can redischarge the conditions once they've been discharged because we have this change in the layout.
Yeah, I mean, I can't quite see that they're looking at it again properly. I mean, we've heard from the parish that it's an issue. But you're saying that effectively we've already discharged it again.
Well, we haven't discharged it again for this layout.
We haven't.
If members were content to approve the section 73, we would be effectively changing the layout of the approved development, and conditions 5 and 6 of the outline would need to be redischarged to reflect that layout and that change in the surface water drainage scheme. As it stands, we have an extant permission under the outline and reserve matters, which could be implemented and has had a drainage scheme discharge via the conditions.
Yeah. Shall I get another one, Chair? Oh, indeed. Yeah, I was wondering about it. Maybe that some of it's already sort of in place, but if we're changing the designs of some of the houses, I mean, what about the energy performance of these generally? I can't actually see any comments from consultees about that.
So the sustainability condition was applied to the outline. So in terms of the previous decision, buildings met and exceeded the requirements of the updated Part L building regs. We also had air source heat pumps provided for the dwellings. In terms of their thermal performance, reducing the glazing will improve the thermal performance of the buildings in that you don't have the large windows. It will degrade the sort of passive solar gain on the buildings, but again, redischarge of that condition is entirely possible.
Yeah, I mean, that was where I was going to, of course, was that we seem there's been a dramatic change in the glazing. Yeah, so
we do have, there is a suggested informative on the recommendation talking about conditions 5 and 6 of the outline. There's no reason why that couldn't be extended to also include condition 12, which was a sustainability condition, and also probably likely the internal road layout, which was condition 21.
Yeah, well, I think we'd be asking for that one then to be
that will probably come up in our debate. Just make a note of those, Councillor Matheson, and make sure that we add them. Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. One of the things the Parish Council flags is the safe access to the primary school. Could you show us on the map where the school is and the walk that people would take and the pavements and lack of?
Around on this bend. So I think their comments are that there are paved surfaces between, but it's not a continuous paved surface. So you need to cross the road at several points, yes. So in terms of speed limits, it's 30 miles an hour when you enter the village, but then at the same time, I am welcome when we come to discussion with the parish, then providing further detail on this for members, because I think they'll have a better idea.
So can you just show whether you think the walking path?
So you would need to...
There's no back way out of being to come out the actual main entrance from the side?
No, because you've got the rear of the school here, so you wouldn't have an access point across the field, so it would be making your access down the road.
Right, cool, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of the officer? Councillor Matheson? Yeah, and Councillor...
I've lost it again now. Yeah, I was a bit concerned at the phrase locally adapted species. I can't recall actually hearing that phrase before, and I guess it's definitely not the same thing as native species. So can you help us
it's not
understand
quite.
that?
So the originally submitted landscaping details for the site used a lot of native species within it. In terms of consultation with Public Realm and Place Services Landscaping, they both said, well, actually, while these are native species, they aren't locally adapted. We have concerns over some of the native species being able to thrive on this site because of the soil types, because of the weather, And therefore we've asked that actually can we have some changes, so we've got some more locally adapted species rather than native species, which we have some concerns about. So they're all native species. There has been change to change some of the native species to species that will be more locally suited, but they still remain native species.
Yeah, so what we, yeah, so it's, yeah, it's just that we were proposing unsuitable, someone was proposing unsuitable species for that location. Good, thank you.
Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. So it looks like on the map that the public open space is actually now smaller. Is that the case?
So in terms of the overall quantum of open space within the development, we've got a similar amount, because in terms of moving the layout, while the open space is now over to the eastern side, we actually have space within the site to open up, so there's more green space within the site. So overall, the quantum is unchanged. The overall size of the space was a concern previously for public realm in terms of we've got a lot of open space to maintain. And it's sort of the focal point of the development, which is nice, but then at the same time, there's not a lot permeating out throughout the rest of it. It's all quite dense. So this allows a sort of an opening up of the rest of the layout. If I flick forward and try and get the landscaping plan, we've got these additional areas throughout the site with planting, and then we still retain a strong amount of tree planting throughout the site, and obviously we've then got the public right of way, which isn't going to be planted over but does form part of the overall scheme of landscaping within the site.
Do you want to come back on that? Or are you happy?
No, it's another question if I can. So just one on SUDs. So from when this application was originally approved, have sort of SUDs rules slightly changed in how we sort of measure what we need? And is this development subject to an older measurement, or with this change, does that bring it into, does it have to come into the new way of sort of measuring SUDs?
So that's interesting. So SUDS guidance has changed and updated, and in terms of climate change data that's required to be demonstrated, that has increased as well. In terms of dealing with the sort of legacy sites that were approved prior to the changes in the SUDS, they can, if they can demonstrate that there is no other viable option of meeting SUDS, they can use measures that would maybe not be adoptable now. If you were bringing this site in as a fresh application, you'd more likely want to be dealing with attenuation ponds on site. But in terms of the capability of the site to deal with surface water runoff and exchange it to existing drainage systems at a greenfield rate, that's still maintained.
Can I come back on that one? So
yeah.
Am I right in thinking then, so my interpretation of what you've just said, is that if this application was to be brought to us today, if this was a brand new application today, the SUDS measures on this site would be inadequate to our current measures. Is that correct?
In terms of the SUDS hierarchy and the SUDS guidance, they prefer to see attenuation basins used on site. So if this was coming as a fresh application, we would be seeing attenuation basins on site. However, given the planning history of the site and the fact we do have an extant permission, there is a permission that could be built out using a similar SUDS scheme that doesn't make the same accommodations for climate change.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Everett?
Just have another couple of questions. One is what kind of barrier, if any, is there between the pumping station and Shop Street?
In terms of?
Is there any barriers, hedging or fencing?
Yes, there's landscaping around the pumping station and substation. So there's landscaping, and then on the access would likely be more open, and the Anglian Water would want space to be able to bring a vehicle in, so that the landscaping would be reduced in order to allow an access.
So what there will be is an element, is that hedging, is it, or fencing?
An element of landscaping, yes.
Okay, thank you. And just one other question. I don't know if this is maybe for the developers, but it's excellent, as I understand it, that all the dwellings will be part M42, but is there any scope to for at least one of them to be M43, given our known that we know that there's a level of need for that in Suffolk?
There's not a requirement in policy to deliver M43. If you deliver M42, it is easier to upgrade a dwelling to M43. At the moment, the Section 106 doesn't require it, it just requires M42.
Thank you. Any more questions? I'll just ask if Daniel could just run through the surface, the boundary treatment, given that Heritage had some concerns about them. Can you just run through what the boundary treatment on the edge of the development in all areas is?
Here we go. Right, okay. So, yes, thank you, Chair. So previously, with the edge of the site boundaring Tuckwells on this side, there was some concern between Heritage, who prefer a softer landscaped boundary, given the countryside edge location of the site, and Environmental Health, who prefer a close-boarded fence for noise attenuation purposes. So on this side of the site, we still have a close-boarded fence. Previous decisions on site felt that actually the noise attenuation benefits of a close-boarded fence would be acceptable on this occasion, given that you're adjacent to a commercial use rather than the countryside. But on the countryside edge, we do have appropriate hedgerow. So along this boundary, it is hedgerow. There'll be a gap for the public open right-of-way, so that continues unimpeded, and then hedgerow around the other sides of the site, and then there's sort of a more it's hedgerow along the frontage here, but obviously reduced level of height, given that it's frontage to the highway.
Thank you. Councillor Hardingham.
Thank you. Yes, well, my final question was about boundary treatment. I noticed that you've answered some of that, but I noticed that some of the fencing is stipulated to be close-boarded with concrete posts, and some of it is just close-boarded fencing. And I just wondered what the difference is and quite why there are different treatments being allocated around the site.
That might be one for the agent to answer when they come to their section on questions. Presumably the difference is maintenance. If you've got concrete posts, the concrete posts are less likely to break, whereas other areas where maintenance is maybe being more frequently undertaken, such as sort of in areas of open space, you've got more constant supervision and ability to make those changes. So if you do have timber fence posts there that then begin to rot or show signs of decay, they can be more easily replaced.
Thank you. Any more questions? If not, then I will move to the public speakers. And we have, first off, we have the representative from the Parish Council, Andrew Nunn. If you would like to have your 3 minutes, I will time you with my high-tech timer. Thank you very much.
Good morning and thank you. I'd like to say from the outset that we are not against the development within the village as such. We know Worlingworth has got to develop, otherwise it's just going to die. However, with this significant expansion over the last 24 years, there's 120 plus additional houses in the village, and the infrastructure really hasn't kept up with it. I've reviewed the drainage application and we still have concerns about how it's going to drain and why. Surface water, to start with, is discharging to a ditch at the rear of the site, and that is going to flow west to east before it meets a head wall, which, you know, is going to be reducing in size and going in a pipe, again, going west to east. It's then going to go through 90 degrees and come north-south, eventually discharging into a further ditch running north-south. And it's then going to go through yet another 90-degree bend before it meets a second head wall and it enters a manhole and into an existing 6-inch, 150mm diameter pipe that goes across the field, the agricultural field behind it, but where it discharges into the river and that, nobody really knows at the moment. So we can see that it's got a lot of bends, it's got a lot of movement in it, and it's effectively causing bottlenecks. While the ditch has been made bigger under this application, we still have reservations that water doesn't like going through 270 degrees, 90 degrees, or that sort of thing, and it's going to cause problems. The other thing is with the foul water, the concerns with regard to the foul water, it's going to be a pump system, which is going to pump up into the existing gravity-fed system there. At the moment, it's going into the wet well and it's going to be pumped up. It's all very good, but when it meets the low point in the village, we have the problem with foul water coming out now. Anglian Water have made God knows how many efforts in the past 5 years to change it, but it's still not coping. And we have concerns that we have raw sewage, feces and everything else flowing in the high street, with children having to paddle through it to get to school. And the surface water is surcharging the foul water, and that's causing the problem. And nobody seems to want to address both of these problems. We still have concerns about the surface water, as I said earlier. That is going to feed over, and round Willow Tree Yard, Willow Green, and that area of the village is a low point, and it just floods and continues to flood. We would like to see these developed further, because I don't think the surface water has actually been dealt with adequately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions of the Parish Council? Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, so are you saying that the sewage system, existing sewage system, is not watertight sufficiently, essentially?
Yes. It's Anglian Water of their own volition admit that there could be leakage into that, or there could be laterals coming in where developers have, inverted commas, put surface water into the foul water. They're investigating it, but they haven't got an answer, and they haven't had an answer for the past 5-6 years.
Thank you. Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. So with regards to the foul drainage, I guess two questions I've got here. So with the foul drainage, when was the last time that it did come up and was sort of seen or smelled? But also, how was, in the storms of sort of late 23, how was that what was a picture of that for Worlingworth? How did it look?
The last lot of foul water that came out was last week. Pumps up through a manhole at the front of Willow Tree Yard, which is fundamentally a dip in the village, but it always comes up there. So the second part of that question was again?
Well, yeah, so sort of Storm Babette and the bigger storms at the end of 23, beginning of 24, how was that for you?
That just went everywhere. I'm sorry, but I was wading round in water waist deep. And while I'm not the tallest of people, you know, kind of, it's unacceptable to have water like that. You couldn't the fire brigade wouldn't drive through it. That's how deep it was. And over a massive area, I think from, I'm trying to think, Swan Road in one direction, and it was about 250 metres, 300 metres was under water where you couldn't drive through it.
Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, in the light of what we heard, I wanted to ask officers where the responsibility lies for sorting out that problem. I mean, we've got the lead local flood authority who's got a general responsibility for drainage and I said, well, up to the point at which it enters the main rivers, I suppose. So where are we going to look for help on this? That's waist deep's bad.
Absolutely. No, I mean, and that's probably a difficulty from excuse me, this planning application point of view. There are limits to what we can do here today with terms of we've got a granted planning application and the surface water we're content would be the same as greenfield runoff, i.e. no worse. So today we're not anticipating an impact on that existing situation, but I completely appreciate what's happened previous to this. So there is a Section 19 Flood and Water Management Act report from Suffolk County Council investigating Worlingworth specifically from Storm Babette, and that includes an array of actions, and the responsible parties, that includes Anglian Water, that includes the local flood authority and environment agencies, what they are going to do and what they'll treat. That's available online if you Google Worlingworth Flood and Water Management Report. That was 2023, that report. So there is a list of ongoing actions that they anticipate to take, essentially regardless of that planning application or anything. That's about the current situation. And what we're saying today is that this wouldn't affect that current situation. It would be the same greenfield runoff that comes off that site today.
With regards to Anglian Water's requirements under the Section 19, there's a requirement within 6 months of the publication of the Section 19 report, which was in October, that they will undertake a CCTV survey of the foul sewage system and any private lateral flows that come off there to identify any roof connections or surface water connections that are entering the foul water system, because Anglian Water's point is that actually the system should be fine to deal with foul water. The issue comes when surface water, as we saw in Babette, gets into the foul water system and it can't cope with both flows, and that's when you get the backup. Within 12 months, as a medium-term action, Anglian Water are to secure funding to implement their measures to reduce surface water entering the foul water system.
Thank you.
The officers have neatly answered my question, which was going to be, did you qualify for a Section 19 report? How many properties got flooded in this village then?
25. Not all at this location, I might add, but at 3 locations throughout the village, east, west and in the centre. So, yeah, there's 25. But them still aren't back in their houses.
Thank you. Yeah, have you got another question?
Yeah, another question. Is the Section 19 report not a material planning consideration that we ought to be looking at?
It is in as far as it sets out what has happened, and we need to make sure that what we do on this site does not impact on that. But we've consulted with the flood authority. They're content that this is no worse than Greenfield was, but the same as Greenfield runoff. So what had happened before would not be changed by this site. That's what we need to make sure has happened. We've got that advice from County Floods. We've got those 2 conditions they'll have to redischarge. And then on top of that, we've got that advice, although yes, Anglian Water do need to potentially do some works to their foul sewage, that is on their responsibility. There's not something further we can do planning-wise to make that happen. As Dan mentioned earlier, they've got a legal obligation to provide that to any dwelling with planning consent. So that is essentially dealt with by another process. And I think I've said to this committee before, if it's dealt with by another process, we can't deal with that. We have to take that on trust that that's the process and that is what will happen. So I think on those 2 fronts, we're aware of that, obviously that's Section 19, but we're also content that this planning application wouldn't change that. And I think also, as Dan mentioned earlier, this is an extant consent. They could build what they've already got consent for. So really, in terms of changes, we're looking at design and layout, and the rest remains essentially the same. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Patchett?
Chair, have we got the developers here?
We have the agent here who'll be coming up next. Did you have another question for the
Am I allowed
parish
to ask the agent a question?
No, we're waiting for the agent to do their speak. Councillor Penny.
The planning officer indicated that you might be able to describe how children might walk to school from the site.
If they come off the site, they'll need to walk on a piece of unmade verge for 150, 200 metres. They'll then have to cross the road to join a piece of metal pathway along 300-400 metres, cross the road again to join the footpath before they can get to the school. So they've effectively no footpath, crossover, footpath, crossover, footpath.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'd just like to, I would just like to remind everybody that there is extant planning permission for this number of houses on this site. And as the planning officer has mentioned, it's really just the change of design and layout that they could go away and build what they had permission for beforehand. But what I would like to ask the parish council is whether they've done a housing needs survey and whether there's a need for more 5-bedroomed houses in Worlingworth, or is there more of a need for 3-bedroom houses?
In all honesty, I think there would be more of a need for 3-bedroom houses rather than 5-bedroom houses. There is a development beyond Piper's Meadow, Piper's Court, which has got a mixture of 5, 4 and 2-bedroom properties. The 2-bedroom properties are actually being sold. The 5-bedroom properties, they're just sitting there.
But you as a parish council have not undertaken a housing needs survey. That's just your sort of gut feeling.
No, we haven't undertaken that survey, no.
Thank you. Any further questions of the parish council? Thank you. So we don't have an objector, we don't have a supporter, but we have the agent, Nicole Perryman. Over to you. You've got your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. Good morning, members. My name is Nicole Perryman. I'm a planner at Ingleton Wood. On behalf of my client, Flagship Group, I'd just like to begin by thanking council members for the opportunity to speak this morning. The presentation by your officer and the accompanying report are very comprehensive, so I'll only raise a few key points based on the questions that we've just seen. So as you've heard, this application relates to amendments to a scheme that were approved by members of this committee at outline stage in 2018 and at reserve matters in 2021. The permission was then implemented, but work was paused whilst an alternative scheme is being considered. The current permission is extant, and therefore the principle of development and most technical details have already been approved. But we are asking members today to approve the very specific amendments proposed in order to make the delivery of these much-needed homes viable. The proposed layout of this amended scheme respects the principles of the previously approved layout, and the applicant remains committed to providing a significant amount of public open space fronting Shop Street with an extensive landscaping scheme to improve the environment for new and existing residents of the village. The altered location of the public open space is considered to offer an improvement in the amenity of neighbouring properties to the east and provides better integration of the public right-of-way. This revised scheme now provides the added benefit of a new children's play area. Biodiversity enhancements have also been carefully integrated into the landscaping design and include new native hedgerows, bird nesting boxes, hedgehog gaps, native trees and wildflower meadow. In relation to the house types, the development retains an appropriate mix of houses and bungalows, and the design of the approved modern homes did actually at the time divide the opinion of this committee. The scheme now proposes traditional house types which are much more reflective of the local vernacular. These amended house types must meet new requirements of Building Regulations Part L, but Flagship also require all of their new homes to achieve a minimum EPC rating of B and a minimum SAP rating of 86. Their preferred route to achieving this is firstly through the use of air source heat pumps and a fabric first approach, and if required, solar PVs will also be considered to achieve these ratings. We listened to the comments of members at the Reserve Matters Committee, and this revised layout pays particular attention to the building orientation in order to maximise energy generations if PV is to be incorporated. We fully acknowledge the concerns raised regarding drainage issues in the village, these existing issues. The overarching drainage strategy for this site has already been approved, and the principles of that strategy have not actually changed from the extant permission. Indeed, the drainage strategy for this revised scheme has been updated to meet for the new layout, and it does now meet the LLFA's latest technical requirements on rainfall data, CV value, and the increased climate change allowance from 40% to 45%. As such, this proposal will lead to an improved drainage position for the site against both the current permission and the existing on-site situation, and the LLFA and Anglian Water continue to accept these proposals. In summary, the proposed development is a minor variation to the approved reserve matters details, but it remains consistent with the outline permission and complies with the national planning policy and the adopted development plan. The proposals provide substantial planning gain in delivering much needed homes to contribute to the council's housing supply on a site that already forms part of the council's commitments. There are therefore no planning reasons.
Are you on your last
Yes.
sentence?
There are therefore no planning reasons as to why permission should not be granted, and we therefore respectfully request that members endorse the recommendation of their officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the agent? Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. So, obviously, you were given the planning permission quite some time ago, years ago. By the time that you start building, it's going to be 7 years. So, I think you would admit that the world has sort of changed since then, especially in Suffolk with regards to our flooding. And Worlingworth is a village, you know it floods. We all know it floods. So, with this change, you had an opportunity to add the correct up-to-date SUDS measures. So why haven't you done that? Why have we not got the up-to-date SUDS measures that could make this site sort of the water sort of cascade and subside at an appropriate level?
So I think, as the officer explained, it's not necessarily the up-to-date SUDS measures. There's up-to-date guidance from the LLFA, which this new proposal has considered entirely. That up-to-date guidance reinforces the SUDS hierarchy, and the expectation is that in the first instance you'll consider whether a full SUDS approach is appropriate. That was considered for this site, and it was considered by the drainage experts dealing with these updated proposals. It wasn't viable to have a full SUDS solution on this site in terms of the conditions of the site, but also being able to achieve the numbers that it already had planning permission for. So by having a full SUDS solution, you have to substantially change the layout, you have to substantially change the access. It would have no longer been in accordance with what we actually had permission for. What we're asking for approval of today is these minor variation in details to the layout and the design. We're not asking for a full wholesale redesign of the scheme, which a full SUD solution would actually lead to a reduction in the number of dwellings on this site. So whilst it isn't a full SUD scheme, it has been considered, and actually the up-to-date technical guidance from the LLFA has been taken on board fully, as I mentioned, in terms of those updated CV values. The updated climate change allowance has been incorporated, and yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Hardingham.
I note that the ditch at the southern boundary is going to have limited discharge rate of 2 litres per second. I wonder how that would compare with the discharge rate from a full SUDS if that had been an option. 2 litres per second seems fairly slow, so I'm just wondering how if there's any comparison we can make.
Yeah, so I think as the officer mentioned, we have to work to greenfield runoff rates, and that's the existing situation is the greenfield runoff rate. The proposed scheme discharges at a rate that also matches that greenfield runoff rate, but it also incorporates the climate change allowance on top of that as well. So yeah, it's a very slow rate, and that's what we mean when we say that actually improves the existing situation on site, because you are controlling those flows more carefully.
Do you want to come back?
Yes, please, yeah. In terms of maintenance of the ditch, obviously a crucial element of that is that its storage volume should be maintained. Is there access for a digger and a dumper to get along the whole length of the ditch and remove, desilt it over, repeatedly over time to make sure that its volume doesn't decrease progressively?
Yes, so there is there's an access strip that runs around the ditch. It's entirely clear to the south of the ditch currently, so it's maintainable, and there'll be planning conditions. There is a planning condition as well that requires such maintenance.
Any further questions, Councillor Overett?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask again about the landscaping around the pumping station. I'm sorry if I don't understand the diagram, but the most recent landscaping diagram doesn't show any hedging at the front, adjacent to Shop Street. So although the pumping station is well hidden from new residents, it appears to be open plan in terms of people across the road. So I just wanted to check that. with you.
No, that's correct. So the hedging and the screening is around the eastern boundary and the southern boundary. So there's a pumping station and a substation that are right next to each other. It has to remain open to Shop Street for access. So there isn't any hedging that can go right on that frontage, but it is screened around it, around all of the sides.
I think my question was around the hedging sort of to the left of it, looking at the diagram. There just seems to be a big section with no hedging at all, where the public area is, and whether or not that could be included.
I believe that's to maintain visibility for access into that substation and pumping station. I believe that's why that gap, that's why the hedging can only go up as far as it can there.
Is that along the front as well? Sorry if I'm not getting this. That's a very big area for visibility then.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure, if I'm being perfectly honest, as to the exact reason why it stops at that very point. There is obviously a cordon sanitaire around there and areas where you can and can't have planting. The landscaping scheme has been considered against the utilities information for the site and the civil engineering design for the site. So I'm fairly sure there is an engineering reason for it finishing at that point.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Penny?
Do the plans include potential or actual home-based rainwater collection solutions?
Not currently. No. They don't include anything in terms of rainwater harvesting as such.
Is it something you might consider?
I can turn to the applicant, but I think it obviously there is a drainage strategy for the site. There's an approved drainage strategy for the site that doesn't include those particular measures. It's not necessarily a requirement, but there's nothing to stop homeowners putting their own water butts and that type of thing on properties. But it's not proposed as part of this variation to the extent permission.
Councillor Rep.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the same question about M43 and whether consideration had been given to that, given this is 26 properties, and we know that there is a huge need for fully accessible properties across Mid Suffolk, and that although M42 does facilitate making those changes, it still costs a lot of money. So, thank you.
Obviously, with this scheme, we're working within the realms of an existing permission, with an existing Section 106 agreement. So there isn't any proposal at this stage to include an M43 unit within there. Obviously, the applicant's gone quite far in terms of bringing M42 in, which the existing scheme prior to this variation doesn't include any M42. So it's certainly an improvement, vast improvement in terms of accessibility, but unfortunately there isn't M43.
Thank you. Any more questions? I've got a couple. You mentioned something about the potential to put solar panels on if it was appropriate, and I wondered whether you had any plans to offer prospective purchasers to put solar panels on before, during construction, as an option. They might pay a bit more for them. That's my first question. My second question is, I'd like you to explain your reasoning behind reducing the number of 3-bed dwellings and increasing the number of 5-bed dwellings in light of what the parish council representative said. Thank you.
So in answer to your second question first, so on the mix of the properties, Flagship have been undergoing an exercise for a number of years. I think as has been pointed out, it's obviously been some time since this planning permission was originally granted. Build costs have changed significantly in that period of time, and the sales values have changed quite alongside that, but perhaps not quite at the same level. Flagship internally have been undergoing an exercise to understand what types of properties they consider from a sales perspective are better placed on this site. This mix still provides a vast range from 1 bed through to 5 beds, so it's still what we consider an appropriate mix in planning terms. In terms of reducing the number of 3 beds, increasing the number of 4 and 5 beds, that is from a sales perspective, and Flagship considered that's what we'll sell. They'll be able to sell within the village. In terms of the solar panels question, I think it's not quite set in stone yet what will be required on these individual houses in order to meet Part L. So that's the next level of detailed design. So some of them may well have solar panels, some of them may well not. I'm not too sure if that's an add-on option that could be done during construction, to be perfectly honest. That's probably not a question I can answer.
So maybe this is a question for the officers. It sounds to me as if the energy requirements of the dwellings are not fixed. So does that, if they do decide they need solar panels and they're not on the plans, does that cause a bit of an issue?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think probably if we expanded that informative that talks about condition 5 and 6 of the outline to also include condition 12 and 21. 12 is the sustainability condition, so we get a fresh report in for that. And that could include whether or not SOS heat pump Part L is solar required. So we could deal with it that way through redischarge of condition 12.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Hardingham.
Thank you, Chair. Well, just to follow up from your question about solar panels, this is something that I've mentioned before, but would you consider installing ducting for solar panels, for the cabling for solar panels in all houses as a means of future-proofing them at very low cost at the build stage? But nevertheless, if somebody is retrofitting solar panels, that entails significant cost in terms of routing cables if that hasn't been thought about at the build stage.
Again, that's probably not a question I can answer from a planning perspective, unfortunately. It's something I can take away to the applicant, but it's obviously not necessarily something we can set in stone in terms of a planning condition at this stage, but it's certainly something I can take away and discuss with the applicant.
Thank you. Yes, no, it was more a question of raising the question now so that it could be considered in the future. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, we don't have anything from the ward member. He hasn't sent anything in writing, and he's not here today. So I will now open the item up for debate. Anyone like to make a start? Patchett?
Well, as you can imagine, I'm not supportive of this. And it is purely down to these SUDs. I know that this is a section 73, so they had the ability to change it. We know Worlingworth floods. We know it does because we've been told that by the parish council, waist deep. We also know that the SUDs on this site are inadequate. We've been told that by the officers. This application would not get through on those SUD measures if it was put before us today. Just because they've sat on the application for 6 years, getting permission 2018, the world has moved on. They have the ability, with this section 73, they had the ability to change this site, to change those plans and actually make this site with full SUDs. They had the ability to do it, but you heard from the agent, they have said they were reluctant to do it because that would mean less houses. Less houses means less profit. So they are putting their profits ahead of the safety and the consideration of this village. I cannot in good conscience vote for this because they have the ability. I think we should reject it. I propose that we reject it. They come back to us with a proposition and a plan that has got full SUDs. I do not understand why they are happy to sort of inflict this damage on the village. They've got the ability to change it. They had it. They brought this application in. Where is their conscience? Where is their moral compass? They should be putting attenuation ponds. They should be doing absolutely everything they can to stop this village flooding, and they're doing the bare minimum, and it is based on house numbers, and it's based on profit, and I am not supportive of it, and I hope the others aren't either.
Did I actually hear you say you are making a proposal to...
oh, certainly, but I don't
so
think
you're
anyone
making a proposal,
will second
and
it.
what are your planning grounds for refusal?
Inadequate suds.
Right, I need a seconder for that proposal. Is anyone willing to second it?
I'd like to have the debate first.
I realise that, but as soon as I have a proposal on the table, I have to find a seconder. I understand that lots of us may have things to say, but we have a proposal, and if there is no seconder, then it falls. You will second it. So we now have a refusal based on grounds of SUDS, but I think Gemma might want to say.
Yes, sorry, Chair. It's just that we haven't got a worded reason for refusal with policies, so just checking that was something we were going to move on with.
That's why I was asking Councillor Patrick what his reasons for refusal were. Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely have the same problems as Councillor Patrick. I wanted to emphasise, so that we put on the record effectively, that the use of Section 73 and how Section 73 operates permits consequences that we would otherwise definitely not agree to, and I think we should be abundantly clear about that, so that if by any chance we agree of refusal and it goes to appeal, then the inspector and the government whose inspector it is are also clear that Section 73 brings with it trouble, which we do not want and it should not allow, which are become particularly clear in these circumstances. And apart from that, I think that the Section 19 report, the recommendations of that should come into the discussion. What we're talking about is the downstream consequences of the drainage scheme that's tied up in this application at the moment, in this version of it at the moment, so that's essentially it. I mean, there are other aspects of this that are not less than ideal, and I must say, looking at it before and reading the papers, I'm thinking, well, yeah, the layout is less satisfactory than it was, and things like that. Is it bad enough to refuse? And I was struggling a bit with it, but having heard about the Section 19 report and heard more from the officers, from the applicant, from the parish, local opinion will not forgive us if we were to approve this.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've been in a different meeting. This site has planning permission for what it's got. We've heard from the Section 19 report that this development will make no material difference to the drainage in the village. The village floods for other reasons, and we've heard that this development will not add to that. If anything, it will add, it'll improve it, because there will be grey and normal foul water separation here. So I am not prepared to support the proposal for refusal at the moment.
Thank you. Do we just need to check with the officers, because I'm not really convinced about the reasons for refusal. So can I just have an update from the officers, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chair. I think that's partly my issue. Yes, I completely understand we've got the Section 19 report, but that has happened regardless of this site. This site itself at that time was undeveloped and nothing had happened, and that flooding happened. So that's a separate issue. that's dealt with by the Section 19 report and various actions are required. That is essentially separate from what we're looking at today. We've now got a planning application, which they could build out now. They could go out tomorrow, essentially, a few discharge conditions, but they could go out in the very short future and build houses here based on a scheme that's been found acceptable by the Flood Authority. Yes, there is that transitional arrangement, but that is also set out by the Flood Authority that allows for, there were these schemes granted previously, the rules now have changed, what do we do? This still accounts for climate change, this still ticks us off, and it's still been approved by County Flood Authority. So they are all reasons why that would be acceptable, and to confirm, foul drainage has been dealt with, and surface water drainage would be the same as or better than Greenfield. So the impact of what we're looking at would be no worse than we are currently today, the water that hits the Greenfield or the water that would hit that as a developed estate, from the advice we've got from our professional agencies. So I would advise caution as far as the sort of suggested reason for refusal, and I don't have a policy background at the moment to do that. So I think Ian might want to add.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice a bit here. Do excuse me. Hopefully I can be heard. I want to give some legal advice. Yeah, Gemma's quite right. I think you've all got the points, and I don't need to repeat it. That there is an existing. It was an outline permission. We have an existing reserved matters approval that the applicant, the developer, could choose to rely on. If you did refuse it today and the applicant chose not to appeal, I mean, my colleagues will tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we all understand they could choose to implement the existing reserved matters approval. There's no time constraints that they've missed there. When you have a Section 73 application, it's to change the conditions of a permission, essentially. And it's quite, the law on this is quite complicated, and there's actually been a case in the Court of Appeal very recently on this. So what the Court of Appeal have said is you have the power to change conditions is very wide. And say you have a full permission, I know this isn't, but just by way of example, for 10 houses, and there's a plans condition saying they'll be built in accordance with the plans that are listed below, you can then have a Section 73 that says scrub those plans. We're not having 10 bungalows, we're having 10 mini mansions, using up less with less gardens. Now, this is different in that there's an outline followed by reserved matters, and there's no doubt, it's been said by the courts, you can use Section 73 to change a reserved matters approval. I mean, if they'd been within the time frame for reserved matters, they could just have stuck in another one and a different reserved matters, and then if they'd got it, used it. But presumably they're too late to do that because the time for applying for reserved matters has gone. So they've got to use Section 73 to change the existing reserved matters. Now, one thing the Court of Appeal said in this case involving Test Valley Council that came out actually on Monday, I think, was it reaffirmed the principle that's been said already in other cases that you can do not a lot of things under Section 73. You can substitute a plans condition that totally changes the house, the location within the site, designs, shape, size of the houses, but you can't alter the description of development. So that I'm just a bit nervous about a refusal based on the fact then that I quite understand Councillor Patch's reasons for wanting to propose it, that we refuse them on the basis that they should reduce the number of houses. I'm not advising you it'd be unlawful to do that because reserved matters approvals sometimes come in for less than the maximum permitted. But this wasn't an up to 26 houses, was it? It was 26 houses, is that right? Yeah. So I just would have a little bit of nervousness about that, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Penny.
I just wanted to ask if a decision could be deferred until the Section 19 measures have actually been implemented to try to reassure residents that the development wouldn't cause any serious added issues for the village.
Well, we currently have a proposal which has been proposed and seconded, so we have to allow that to go to a vote. If that fails, then there's nothing to stop you putting another proposal for deferment, but we do currently have a proposal on the table. Thank you. Councillor Penny?
It was, yeah, I just wanted to ask the officers whether it was a possibility. I wasn't...
Okay, over to Gemma.
So just in terms of the Section 19 report, kind of rather than the deferral point, I think the issue with that is it's quite long-term. I don't think it sets a specific timetable, but it does have short-term, medium-term and long-term actions. So that is quite open, and I think the reason they don't set timescales is they can be flexible, and as long as they're under discussion, it's there. Oh, sorry, I've just seen it. So 6 to 12 months is the short term, the medium is 12 to 24, and long term does just say to be confirmed. So you're looking at a period of years, not a few weeks where we might say that. So I think that would be difficult to suggest we should do that, and particularly given the advice we've got is this doesn't impact on that scenario. I hope that answers the question.
Councillor Hardingham.
Yeah, I would like to bring some perspective into this discussion about drainage and the risk of flooding, because it's frankly not within the capacity of this development to eliminate the current risk of flooding in Worlingworth. You could, I mean, as an extreme, you could catch all the rain falling on that site and tanker it away, and that still wouldn't affect the flooding that would happen in Worlingworth village itself. So we really need to think in terms of what is reasonable and possible. It seems to me that the steps they've taken, which are enhanced relative to the original permission and reduce the rate of runoff from the site, it seems to me that is a sensible compromise and a sensible situation to live with. So that's my point of view. So I certainly wouldn't support a refusal on the flimsiest of grounds.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson, did you also have your hand up? You need to put your mic on.
Yes. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. I just wanted to ask the officers those definitions of short-term, medium-term. Are they that report, or are they Section 19 generally?
So I think they're generally how Section 19s work, having seen a few of them for Debenham, Worlingworth, other places all affected by Storm Babette. In terms of actions, in terms of the foul water network, they all sit with Anglian Water. So the short-term requirement for them is to undertake a CCTV survey of their foul water network, work out where surface waters comes in. It's then a medium-term, 12-month objective for them to seek the funding to enable them to then go back and approach individual householders, landowners, to make the changes to enable the foul water network to cope better with large amounts of surface water. So part of that is a 12 to 24-month project about the implementation of individual rainwater storage, so retrofitting of SUDs, fitting slow release water butts to certain properties where they are making connection to the foul water system, so you've got a slow release of water rather than all of the water entering the system all at once. But the majority of that work all sits with Anglian Water, who are a third party to this and not subject to our ability to condition, unfortunately.
Thank you. Well, there are things about this development that I don't like. I don't like the fact that we've lost a few three-bed houses, because I think three-bed houses are for younger people, and I think that's a shame. And I think maybe, you know, whilst I completely agree with the sentiment of Councillor Patchett, and profits are unfortunately what the developer is out to make. So they think they can make more profit with five-bedroom houses. They think they can make more profit if they don't put a SUDS in. But unfortunately, that is the way of the world. I also preferred the slightly more modern design. I like modern houses to look like modern houses rather than look like old houses. I think actually the position of the open space is probably more appropriate than it was in the original plan. But unfortunately, my dislike of vernacular and 5-bed houses is probably not a planning reason for refusal. So, and whilst I do empathise about all this drainage, this site has already got planning permission for that number of houses, and as Councillor Hardingham said, what we've got now is certainly no worse than the existing planning permission which they could go out and build. So I can't support the current proposal that we've got for refusal, but anyway, I will let Councillor Overett have her say. Well, yeah, but he has had lots of things to say. I thought I'll ask you to make your comment and then he can say something else.
Yeah, morally, personally, I think there are grounds in which I'm not comfortable with this application, and certainly, as Councillor Mansell said, the reduction in smaller properties and cheaper properties. I very much welcome Councillor Patchett's proposal because I think it's certainly enabled me to kind of dig down more into this, and all of us maybe, to dig down into this discussion to clarify for me where the decisions are profit-led and to have my own views on that. But I've also found the balancing comments helpful as well. So, thank you.
Councillor Matheson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, what I was wanting to do was to invite Councillor Patchett to withdraw the refusal proposal so that we can explore, excuse me, so that we can explore a little bit further what Councillor Penny was saying about a possible deferral. You know, albeit any of these options might bring forward an appeal or an appeal basically. Nevertheless, we really should be trying and looking to find a way to alleviate waist-deep water somehow. I accept what people are saying, that it's no worse than the one before it, but these are desperate times. So can you perhaps withdraw the refusal and have a further exploration?
Happy to withdraw so we can discuss Councillor Penny's proposition.
Are we allowed to have a... Right, so that proposal is now being withdrawn. Right, and that's all okay. Right, thank you. So now we can continue the debate. Councillor Lawrence.
I just feel that we're outstepping our mark as a planning committee. There are experts, and as the planning office, case officers has reported to, there is a lead flood authority for making these decisions and are far better advised than we are as a planning committee. And I think we're trying to go outside our remit if we're trying to solve the flood issues in Worlingworth. So I think we need to be very sensible in our discussions and keep level-headed about what we can and cannot actually do. And in my view, the proposal we have so far is no material change to the Section 19 report, and therefore there is no refute that I support, and I would propose to support the officer's recommendation for approval.
So that is now we've got a proposal to go along to approve the planning permission as per the officer's recommendation. Yeah. So do I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor
I'm happy to second that, thank you.
So we now have another proposal on the table to go along with the officer recommendation, and that has been seconded. So now have a debate on that proposal. Councillor Penny.
Well, I would quite like to see some home-based water collection facilities included in any conditions, because very little is currently being done in that regard all over the country, not just here, but I think it ought to be part of our design of structures, and particularly where surface water flooding is of concern in the village. I think such measures are vital here.
Thank you. Is that something we are able to condition over to the planning officers? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy if members wanted to put a condition on to require water butts provided to each property. I don't think that's unreasonable in the circumstances if our proposer and seconder are happy with that.
So how do our proposer and seconder feel about adding that as a condition?
I'm happy with that proposal.
So we've now got a condition requiring water butts. Thank you. Councillor Penny?
Also on the subject of... sorry, I've just turned it off. Also on the subject of conditions, Councillor Hardingham was suggesting conduiting for the wiring necessary for future-proofing buildings could be considered. Is that something that also could be conditioned?
Can that be, was there something about sustainability?
There is an informative to be added that would detail conditions 5 and 6 of the outline, and it has been suggested that that might want to be expanded to include condition 12, which is a sustainability condition, which could include thought about ducting for solar panels where solar panels aren't to be provided, and I suspect also condition 21 of the outline, which is internal roads, because we've had the change. I think there might also be a opportunity based on what's been discussed about, we have a condition about detail of the pumping station and substation that could perhaps be amended to also include landscaping to the frontage where it's would not obscure visibility.
So, but that bit about the conditions that still need to be discharged again, that's just an informative?
That's just an informative,
So,
yes.
so does that mean it's not sort of legally binding, or do they have to do it anyway?
They'll have to do it anyway, because the layout will have changed. So although we've approved a SUD scheme and a road layout, it's the old road layout. So if they build out the new layout, they will need to redischarge.
So if they build out this development, we can ask them to include more energy sustainability measures such as the ducting and the other things that have been mentioned.
I think condition 12 could accommodate that.
Right. So are they? And they're listed on the informative at the bottom.
I have
are
a suggested informative that covers 5 and 6. I suggest that we expand that to include 12 and 21 as well.
Right. Thank you. Those suggestions, Councillor Penny. Councillor Hardingham.
I think I read in the report that, or in the planning application, that there is provision for water butts to the rear of the houses, but none at the front. So maybe this water butt provision should be front and back. That's one point. And just as a general comment, my greatest concern over this planning application is the lack of a safe access to school. And I would very much like to see a safe pavement provided all the way along the road to the school, or indeed another route explored. But I don't think it's within our remit to consider that today, unfortunately.
No, I don't think that can be asked for with this this development, unfortunately. It's a pity they can't have a sort of footpath access out the back of the footpath if it is literally only across a couple of fields, but I guess that's private land and we can't insist on that. Anybody else got anything they'd like to say about this proposal or this development? Councillor Overett.
Yeah, just to respond that although I appreciate some people feel it's outside of our remit to have this debate, but I do think it's really important that we do have it, and that we are able to express our concerns about more overriding things than absolutely what our remit is, and to debate only within that. Thank you.
Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, that is exactly why I wanted to emphasise the role of Section 73 specifically in this difficult quandary that we're stuck in. It goes far too far, and I think that the officers have described, or perhaps legal officers have also helped to describe just how wide it can stretch, much too wide in my opinion, obviously. Yes, so I won't be supporting the approval.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything? I'm going to ask the area planning manager to read out the proposal, which is currently on the table, before we go to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we're looking at an approval as the recommendation, which is on page 23 of the papers, with an additional condition for water butts to be provided to each property, and then an addition to the informatives to note that conditions 12 and 21 also need to be redischarged in addition to the 5 and 6 that are already in the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
And on those discharge of conditions, the thrust of what our discussion have been around will be incorporated. How do we guarantee that those suggestions will be considered?
So you've got your officer here today. We will take that away, and we'll also go to a professional sustainability expert. We've now got an external advisor, so they will give us some advice on that. So we will take that away. I don't think we could go as far as setting out expectations in the informative. There is quite a lot in the condition, and at least that does give us a flexibility. If they offer something better, that might be where we take that. So I would ask members leave that with us, but we have heard what you would like to add on, and said Dan's here today, so we'll make sure we take that away.
And presumably those discharge of conditions have to go through the consultation process. So we've got the parish council here, and hopefully they will remember what we've asked for, and they can then comment as well. So because obviously we can't keep tabs on every discharge of conditions, but I'm hoping that the parish council might be looking at discharging conditions in their own parish. So thank you for that. So we've had the proposal read out, so I'm now going to ask the governance officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote has been updated and is now in progress. Thank you, members. That's 6 votes for and 2 against. That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of our list of planning applications. We have an item number 8 on our agenda, site inspections.
None received, Chair.
So the next meeting of the Mid Suffolk Planning Committee will be on Wednesday, the 15th of January at 9:30. That will be downstairs in the Frink Room. So I'd just like to wish everybody a happy Christmas and lovely New Year, and see you all again in January. Thank you very much.